If
We
Elise
start.
isn't here, I have to think.
Hi, everyone. This is Amy Major with Spirit Rescue Talk. I have a wonderful guest, Carl Johnson, that's on today. I'm so excited to have him on because he has a wealth of knowledge. And of course, as I posted, he is a demonologist. It is very closely connected to the work that I do as a spirit rescue specialist. And a lot of you are going to have a lot of questions from Carl. So I think I'm going to try to ask as many questions as I possibly can to make sure you all get the knowledge you need. So I just want to welcome, hi, Carl. How are you doing today?
Hi there, Amy. It's so good to see you. Thank you for inviting me to your show. I will answer all your questions to the best of my ability.
I might just be picking that brain today, just because you have so much wealth, so much knowledge, so much experience. But before we get into that, can you tell the audience how you got to where you are today? A little bit of a background on the work you've done.
Yes, I aged. That's what I did. Yeah. Um, I've always been interested in things paranormal and unusual. Of course, felt I was destined to become a paranormal investigator. I was exploring strange ghostly things when I was 15, 16 years old. Actually, I started when I was 14. That would be my spirit board play with my younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
That was always fascinating. And I was raised in a sporadically haunted household anyway. So we had strange things happening, knocks on the walls we couldn't explain, objects moving, disappearing. And also then my mother brought us a Ouija board, the most popularly known spirit board. My sister and I started getting results on that.
Right.
Of course, asking who am I going to marry? How old will I be when I die? And I'm supposed to be dead about 3 times over, according to that. But we did get results, and we got give us a sign, and we got raps on the wall. And that's how it's almost like the Fox sisters in the 1840s. So, which ushered in modern spiritualism in this country. So it's always been an interest of mine. Then when I was 17 years of age, I attended a lecture at Rhode Island College in Providence. And the featured speakers were Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I listened to the Warrens speak, and I thought, that's what I want to be when I grow up. Of course, I didn't know I was going to become so acquainted with the Warrens because Mr. Warren, Ed Warren, had a audience participation, questions and answers, and he started asking questions. And Mr. Warren said, "Is there anybody here who has ever talked on a spirit board?" Like they always said, Ouija board. So I kind of shyly raised my hand. Has anyone ever done a magic spell or ritual? And asking questions like that. Has anybody ever had active communication with a spirit? I'm like, okay, come up here, young man. And so I became part of the lecture for the next 10 minutes. They're asking me questions and all that. And I told them I was talking to Ouija board. And of course, the Warrens did not agree with that unless they were doing it. But it was a very, very entertaining lecture. Of course, both Ed and Lorraine have passed on. Some of our listeners, I'm sure, were lucky enough to be acquainted with the Warrens. Now, I did not agree with much of the Warrens' methodologies, but it was a pleasure to listen to them and know them. What you see in that movie, The Conjuring, where they have a picture, which is almost all fictionalized, based on a true story. Right. But to see Ed and Lorraine up there speaking as they portrayed them in a lecture hall, that was what you got with Ed and Lorraine. They were charming, interesting, fascinating. You didn't want their talk to end. And because of that, I was invited to join a group at Rhode Island College. It was PIRO, Parapsychological Investigatory and Research Organization. I was only 17 and I wasn't enrolled at the college, but I came to their meeting on Tuesday, and my twin brother was with me too. So he became a member of this PIRO, and we were investigating exterior settings that are reputed to be haunted. We saw some remarkable things. And then we wanted to branch out into residential cases, like evaluate someone's haunted house. To that purpose, my brother placed an ad in a local periodical advertising the existence of our group, and we don't charge for our investigations. So we were contacted 3 weeks later by a Mrs. Carolyn Perrin. I don't know if you're familiar with the name.
Yes.
Said movie, The Conjuring. So Carolyn Perrin contacted us and told us that she and her husband a year and a half before had purchased a farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and they had some strange goings on there. They wanted us to come and investigate. So Mrs. Perrin came to the college, we interviewed her, and then we went to the farm in Harrisville that 40 years later would be known as the Conjuring House. And remarkable things happened there. Now I'm encapsulating what could be a 2-hour story. And then, well, we became more involved in this investigation. We were seeing some, oh yeah, remarkable things happen in that house, genuinely haunted. I have my own theories on why it was, how it became that way, as does my para partner, Elise. And we thought it would be, I think my brother conceived of this, that it would be a good idea to contact Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now, I knew them. They had dinner at my parents' house, which is my best memory of the Warrens. I lectured with them several times. So I thought it would be a good idea, and my brother, to contact Ed and Lorraine Warren and benefit from their vast experience. We never felt we were in over our heads with this investigation. We just wanted to consult the Warrens.
Right.
Well, long story short, if that's still possible, Mr. Warren volunteered their presence. He said, we'll come over. Ed and Lorraine and I will come there. Lorraine and I will come there to the house. And so they did. And I remember greeting Ed and Lorraine Warren at the gravel driveway, the house in Harrisville. And I introduced them to Carolyn and Roger Perrin. And we started a preliminary investigation during which Mrs. Warren had a vision. You know? And so it was very enjoyable. I said, well, now we're actually working with the Warrens. So I did ask Ed Warren, I said, now I understand we're going to be working on this case together. And he said, oh, absolutely. Well, that would be the last day that I saw Roger and Carolyn Perrin and their 5 daughters for the next 40 years, because the Warrens took over that investigation. But Mrs. Perrin was calling me every day for a good couple of weeks and some days, telling me about the new happenings in her home, and I would advise her. And I had a simpatico with Mrs. Perrin, we just hit it off, and she would confide in me, tell what was happening. We'd have some conversations where we weren't even talking about the haunted house. So after the advent of the Warrens coming to that house, I just ceased hearing from Mrs. Perrin. So this is unusual to go a day without talking to me, and then a few days. So our team at Rhode Island College had a meeting, and we just decided that, or evaluated that, either it was a really intense situation and the Warrens were giving it their full attention, or they had resolved the problem altogether. So in any event, we didn't seem associated with that investigation anymore. But then Carolyn Perrin, 16 days later, she did call me and she apologized for having been out of touch. But she said the Warrens had told her and her husband, Roger, that they had to take over this case or they could be of no use. They had to be the sole paranormal investigators. We were just a bunch of college kids. We could only get in the way. And that's what the Warrens said. So they had to go with the experts. But at that time, when the Warrens took over, it ceased being an investigation. We were conducting, to the best of our abilities and our equipment, a scientific investigation, documenting, taking pictures, recording, and it became an intercession, because immediately the Warrens diagnosed the house as being a demonic haunt. And that's where we get into demonology. Ed Warren was a lay demonologist, not ordained, but a demonologist. And I am a demonologist. That means simply I address the more sinister seeming, darker, malevolent situations that are brought to my attention if they have paranormal leanings. I get contacted by paranormal teams and they'll say, we're in over our heads with this. We can't, this is not in our expertise. We need you here, Carl. And I only know as much as the last situation in which I was involved, because everyone is unique. Yes, I do have learning and training in this because I've been at it so long. But when you're coming into a demonic, or thought to be a demonic case, you don't know until you get there what's going to happen, what could. You just try to draw in, well, my experience.
Well, so, question, what would make somebody believe that they actually have a demonic presence rather than just a regular ghost or earthbound spirit? Are there differences in the type of haunting they would be experiencing for them to think that it's a demon?
Yes, but it is interpretative. If the clients, we said the people who called us in, and then the team calls me in, if it's inconvenient for the people residing in the house, They don't want it. Like with a ghost, they might just want an investigation to, what else can you tell me? But we don't want it gone necessarily. But if the residents are being disturbed, kept up at night, they're scared to go into their house, and it's natural for them to label it a demonic situation. And that's when I would get called in. If they have an unpleasant feeling in their house that seem to come on suddenly, but that rarely, if ever, happens. It's more like it was that way when they moved in, and then they find out. They see darkenings, shadowy forms, shadow people moving about. Family members start to quarrel where they hadn't before. They smell foul odors they can't identify. Suddenly those odors dissipate. Maybe literal writings on the wall. Pets get sick and sometimes, expire. Just things go awry. I think we must have something wicked in our house. And that's my definition of a demon, as a wicked spirit. My definition of demonology is the systemized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. Now, again, if it's inconvenient for the people living there, then it's easy to say it's demonic and they want to get rid of it.
Right.
And I will say there is no standard formula for banishing a demon. You see that on television and in movies. It's basically you interview the clients, the people, and find out how it started. What was the origin of this? And then the demonologist has to have the stamina to stand up to it, to confront it if need be, or be there and not be chased out of the house. And sometimes things happen that make the investigator or the specialist, the demonologist, want to leave. When you see religious icons and holy pictures turn themselves upside down, religious pictures or a crucifix flies off the wall, people are suddenly scratched or slapped, and they have a red mark on the face or arm. You see a chair move out across the room, all of which I have experienced. Then that's hairy. That makes you want to leave. It sounds very interesting and exciting, but when you're in the middle of it, you really don't want it. It's like, I'd rather be any other place right now. But the demonologist should stand his or her ground and be resolute that they're not going to be driven out, whatever they see, whatever they behold or experience. And that instills confidence in the people they're trying to help, of course.
Right.
And different persons will interpret it, as I said, their own way. For instance, you being a spirit rescue, a medium, you may see a distressed spirit. If it's really heady and you sense that, you may, wonder or classify it as demonic. You'd probably question it first without making that determination.
Right.
If it's someone that's white witch, Wicca, however they term it, they might see it's like an earth spirit that's rebelling. Or what else? Like typical paranormal investigator might say it's a trapped spirit. A psychic medium even might say that's a trapped spirit trying to, it needs to move on into the light. Demonologists would probably say, yeah, it's something wicked and it wants to wreak havoc. We have to get rid of it. I'm not, if there is such a thing, I am not, and I believe there is, I'm not a standard demonologist. I have an identical twin brother, Keith. He is a religious demonologist. He pretty much goes by the book, or he will talk about theory. I see the human origins in these manifestations, that it has to start with some kind of conflict. Everyone I've known who's had a demonic problem in their house or in their mind has some seriously unresolved conflict or has been traumatized at some point in their life. And then it will manifest sometimes later in their lives, like as an adult, if they were traumatized as a child. That's what the interviewing process is so important.
Right.
To find out how these things, that's what I want to know. How did it start? It's like a ball of string, a twine, all knotted up. We have to try and unravel that. See, we get back to the basics, to the origin. Where did it start? I'm not one who will say that, well, this demon sprung from hell and now for whatever reason it wants to take over your house. It's bothering your 13-year-old daughter. Your son is acting strange. Well, okay, there are clues, the psychological aspects. Okay, a 13-year-old in transition, adolescent, establishing his or her identity. You know, another definition I have for a demon is a poltergeist with a really poor attitude. And poltergeists are known for banging and doing things.
Right.
And my mission, if you will, is to try and mix oil and water, combine psychology with parapsychology and paranormal manifestations. Normally the two are not related, but I'm trying to legitimize demonology. It's always going to have that stigma if you call it demonology, that spooky stuff. That's unreal to a lot of people. But since I believe that demonic infestation has its origins within the human mind, and now I'm not saying imaginary because it's a very potent force.
Right.
That's why psychology has to be played into it. You have to examine the people. What made them? What are their personality types? What influenced them? Why is this thing going on? And sometimes the manifestations, even if they're demonic, are cries for help. It's like the house has a psychic scream. And a house will be affected by, of course, the people living in it. The house can take on a memory. In one case in point is that house in Harrisville, Rhode Island, we now call the Conjuring House. That was built in 1736, and it's had plenty of time to absorb a lot of memories. And I have my own ideas on how the haunting in that house started. I really don't think the house was haunted before the advent of the Perrin family. The Perrins purchased the house, and in 1971, mid 71. And I think that's when things started happening in the house, not before. It doesn't have a long and tragic history, as is then sometimes illustrated. You see, there's the canon, the typical story. It was promoted by the movie, the motion picture, The Conjuring, and it's been augmented by people who, have visited there and have an interest in the house. But it doesn't have a long and dark history. The one entity, one person that really lived associated with that house is Bathsheba Thayer Sherman and their wife, Judson Sherman. And she was thought to have been a devil worshiper and a witch, and, a baby killer. And that is so fictitious. You can, research her. And a lot of that lore, like, yeah, somebody died in the house. Well, one would think 1736 is that would happen. But a lot of these things, like a woman hanging herself, and that was another house, another farmhouse down the road. And names get confused, like the Arnold name, the Richardsons, those were names of the house. It could be called the Richardsons house for the first, the people who had it built. And there is a story, a legend of someone, an itinerant person, going into the barn and found dead there. He froze overnight. Oh, that's not, he was, from what we know, he was drinking heavily that night, and that does happen. So this nefarious history of that house in Harrisville, it can be really opened up and shed a light on it. I think the house is remarkable as itself without adding to the lore,
Right.
But I believe it started with the parents' house, because there was a husband and wife bought this property new to them, and they had ambitions for it, and they had 5 daughters. Carolyn Perrin was highly sensitive, psychically gifted, I believe, impressionable, and I'm not saying delusional. And she had the 5 daughters. She was an influence on them. Now you're in an old spooky farmhouse and start seeing things, the mother does, and the daughters do. That's even a psychological lodestone. It's a formula for a haunting. Right. And if the land and the house is haunted, well, you talk about Native American, the indigenous people burial ground. North America is an Indian burial ground, right. And probably it's called Round Top Hill, Round Top Road. Could have been a burial mound. A lot of memories stored in the land. Right. All kinds of factors to look into that we may never be able to know. Lime deposits under the soil, quartz, all psychic batteries. A lot of reasons that could be haunted. Right. But I don't think it was an actively haunted house before 1971. I wasn't there. I never thought there was enough activity in the house to drive somebody out of it. But I wasn't living there. So for us, it was a cool place to, oh yeah, that's what happened here. So a dark shadow. That's the first thing I noticed in that house. That there was a dark, I shouldn't even call it a form because it was formless. You couldn't see where it began or ended. I call it the darkening, actually. Now, when our team from Rhode Island College first went at the parents' invitation, we first went to that house. We were conducting the interview process with the parent family, the daughters and the mother, Carolyn. And we were seated on her settee, and I heard shufflings and walking around upstairs. And I said, "Excuse me, Mrs. Perrin, do you have guests upstairs?" She and the girl said, "No, we hear that almost every day. Nobody up there." So I waited for the interview to resume, and I kind of backed off, silently went up the stairs. And then when I got to the top of the stairs, as the noises ceased, there was nobody up there. I heard people walking around, shuffling. I was up there a couple of minutes, and out of my right peripheral vision, and then this is in the house in Harrisville, I saw something dark. I turned around, and this darkness, it was actually like the absence of light, but our eyes interpreted as black, and it started to roll towards me. It was so palpable. My first thought was, there's a fire in the house. I'm going to smell smoke. It's a backdraft. So I closed my eyes. This thing came toward me. Darkness. It was darkening the room, enveloped me, and then it was gone. So I quietly went back downstairs, and I guess they thought I was looking for the bathroom. Came back, and I gave my brother this kind of look like something's up there. So things were happening. You know, heard the raps on the walls, the footsteps. One thing remarkable that day is, shortly after that incident, is we all went upstairs. Our case manager had to kind of be prodded upstairs because it's a spooky house. And we went into where the girls' bedrooms are, and that's, where I saw that darkness. And Mr. Perrin, Roger, brought us into a room. There was a window. Now, this was August of 1973. It's, of course, August in Rhode Island, very hot and humid. There was a door, a window jammed open. But in that room, it was like an icebox. So chill in here, but it should be hot. If anything, it should be the hottest room in the house. He said, "I can't get that window to close." I tried it. I didn't want to break it. I tried. I can't close it. Humidity, whatever. But it was jammed open. When my brother came into the room, he tried an experiment in, I call it mild provocation, religious provocation. My brother recited a psalm, the 23rd Psalm, and then he spoke the name of Jesus. Right then, that window slammed shut. Good timing? I don't know. We'd been trying to budge it, but then Roger had tried before. It slammed shut. Then one of the daughters, I believe it was Nancy, she had welts on her face. We actually kind of heard a slap, and she had 3 striations, marks on her face, like she was slapped. So things were going on in that house, and I think it had a lot to do with Carolyn's, if not everything to do with Carolyn's sensitivity and the daughters receiving, being influenced by that surrounding, and it manifests, it becomes real. So that was our introduction to that house. And for us, it's fascinating. We would come back anytime, but to live in that where things are happening, it's, a little hairy.
I know a lot of people don't realize that there's something called feeding the energy. So something minimal could be happening in your house that could seem dark, spooky, scary. And then every time you pay attention to it, every time you project fear towards it, every time you talk about it, bring people in to investigate it, you're actually feeding the energy of anything that could be manifesting. It could be building upon itself. Do you think maybe something could have been happening where it could be getting progressively worse because so many people are focusing on the negative energy that was there?
Under that premise, that presence was having a feast because it had Carolyn and the 5 girls. It had a long history, and that history was kind of augmented. But yeah, I mean, that was being fed daily, and I think it took on a life of its own. The house, in essence, was devouring the occupants. I think if another family had moved in there, more, pragmatically minded people, not so interested in the past or esoteric, then I think it would not have been haunted. They might have heard some bumps and noises, like those sounds like footsteps, but they wouldn't have paid attention to it. Not much would have happened. But that was the perfect storm.
Right.
with the parent family being there, and Roger contributed too. Roger, is sometimes a volatile person, and I think he was expelling his energy and feeding the entity, feeding the house, so to speak. And I am pretty convinced that if it was another family, those things would not have been happening there.
Right.
What the past is, history of that house has been so overblown, but it can't be verified. It's all hearsay.
Well, people love a
People
good
still,
story.
yeah, it is,
They
but it's
really do.
fascinating on its own. It's just from whatever angle you approach it and analyze it, it's still very, very interesting sight.
Absolutely. And it sounds like a lot of the work they do really, forms in line with the same thing that spirit rescue specialists do, such as myself, because when we
Yes.
come into a haunting location, we deal with manifested energy. Like you were talking about the psychology of what's
Yes.
projected from individuals. I would say that's a good 50% of the hauntings that we walk into are
Based on your
mental
experience.
manifestations and
Hmm.
projections of
Yes,
energy in the space.
I actually touch on that in this nice book called Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. I wrote that along with,
I think that's upside down.
well, that's how
I'm
you're
guessing.
interpreting it.
Thank
No,
you.
that's better.
Oh, Shadow
Much easier.
Realms.
Yep. Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. It's my book. I wrote that with Lana Jan Brock, and she has psychological training, and she's an accredited theologian. So we do touch on psychological approach and analysis in our book. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, you were talking about a lot of lower soul forms that we would consider earthbound spirits that have moved into a lower state of consciousness and become more demonic, become more of the epitome of the fear, the hatred, the anger that consume them in life. And they're now just a fragment of that negative energy that can manifest in a shadow form, shape-shifting form. And a lot of people call them demons, but they're really origins of human behavior
Mhm.
and a human soul. I have been in contact though with what we call non-human entities.
Well,
Have
well.
you ever had any experience with, I'm sure you have, with anything that's non-human of origin, but is something much different than most people would consider a demon?
I'm acquainted with the term. What if they have nothing to do with people at all? Um, I think it's all intertwined with human existence. It's essential. It's like the old axiom of if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it really make a sound? Well, of course, the answer is yes and no. There may not be an ear there to interpret that sound. But non-human, the pre-existed human beings, I just don't see that as plausible. I mean, maybe because it's the big DUNO, but I don't think this is a demonic race that pre-existed human beings. Although there's a good chapter in my book about that. I kind of liked it. I like writing it.
Mhm.
But a standard, and there are standards, definition of a demon is, and this was right from Ed Warren, is an entity, an evil entity that never walked the earth in human form, and naturally associated with evil. All demons are supposedly evil and hate the human race. If there are demons that don't hate us, I just never met them. I haven't heard of them. Maybe they don't want anything to do with us. But an entity that never walked the earth in human form. Okay, that would apply to angels as well as demons, because they're not, the lore is they're not of human origin. I just think they're inextricably intermeshed with the human psyche and our output. But that's my observation. It's not necessarily the definitive answer. But yeah, I've heard of inhumans. Like, is it an inhuman? It's a different way of saying demon. Yeah.
Right. And I know a lot of people are talking these days because, the field of this work is growing considerably. A lot of people are talking
Yes.
about reptilians and multidimensionals. They're speaking of shape-shifting, hybrids. Have you ever come across anything that would be
Well,
something like that?
granted, people want answers. It's difficult to say we just don't know. And I think as a student of parapsychology, as Elise would call herself, she wouldn't call herself a parapsychologist. So she's a student of parapsychology. I think we need to interpret it, and we have all kinds of interpretations. We have the space aliens, or aliens from other planetary systems. We have shapeshifters. We have shadow people. You know, interesting. Yeah, I've bumped into a few shadow people in my time. What the reality is, we don't know, but they do seem to manifest differently at times.
Mhm.
They're a little spooky. Now, what's this that came up? Enter your password. I'm going to get rid of that just popped up.
Now, do you ever find that these demonic entities or lower form entities can influence other spirits that might just be wandering or lost, or even put them in a hostage situation? So it may be seeming like they're all demons, but maybe they're not. Maybe one demon that's around a few other earthbound spirits that are trying to escape. Do you ever find any hostage situations in your work?
Uh, that's supposition on my part. I don't know. It seems borne out at times. I guess it's natural to assume that spirits would, just as living humans do, they would conflict with each other and not always be on the same page, and want to, like I'm here now, lower entities want to take over a house or want to be part of it, want to interact with the humans or want to pester them. And something else might come in and say, no, I disagree. But I thoroughly believe that spirits do communicate with each other.
Mm,
I've heard it even on EVP, electronic voice phenomena. They speak with each other and they speak with us. I think it's irrefutable, in my experience, that spirits do communicate with humans and with each other. Spirits, loaded term. We lack scientific nomenclature. We say spirits, demons, shadow people. Trying to describe these things, these manifestations. And but they'll talk. I have recordings where we went into an investigation in North Providence, Rhode Island, and the owner of the house he was 73 years of age. He was a funeral director. He just didn't want to retire. He didn't have to, and I think he was bringing his work home with him, because the voices we got on the audio recordings, like these guys. Wow, yeah. And one says, one woman's voice says, we had a female investigator. She didn't have any ink on her, but she says, bitch, get another tattoo. And boy, these guys, ooh, and they're talking with us. Now I'm going to try and get rid of a screen here. Hopefully this won't get rid of us.
I think the spirits are just messing with you, which is what
Yeah,
they
they don't. They
do.
didn't want me to talk right at you.
Now,
Yeah.
question for you. We have certain techniques in spirit rescue that we use to help clear these negative spirits or entities from places that are haunted. Do you have certain techniques that you use to clear these entities out, or do you call somebody else in to kind of clear
No,
them?
I do handle that in very direct fashion. In fact, I say you have basically sum it up as, and I will offer prayers and sometimes incorporate reading of scripture. But then it comes down to the showdown, the old gunfight. I say, you have no place here. You will leave now. And I have to say that with authority. I have to say that with confidence. Inside, I might be jelly. I say, who do I think I am? I don't know. All these people are relying on me. But and another part of me takes over, and I will not be driven out. I will help these people to the best of my ability. And that's where my basic courage comes in. But it's another part of me that I'm projecting. I can't just leave these people without any answers or any
Right.
resolution. There's a case of demonic possession going on in Edmond, Oklahoma. Now it'll be 12 years ago soon, and actually this month, 12 years ago. And this young woman went under a fit of possession, had all the signs of it, thrashing about, some furnishings and objects moving on their own while she's undergoing these fits. And I had to approach her. Now she went into such a violent display that even it was documented for an episode of The Haunted, and that's in like reruns now. But so there were camera mentors, but you forget the camera crew was there. Actually, we just went on with it, and a very modest camera crew because they wanted to capture the reality of these moments. So she went into a very violent episode, and everybody, including the camera person, is backing up and the other investigators. I had to have the wherewithal to approach her, to walk up, because nobody else is gonna. What else are we going to do? I had, so what, I'll take a chance. I went up to her and put my hand on her shoulder, and I said, it's all right. It's all right now, and that helped her. But it was a very trying moment. It was scary because you got objects moving around. It's psychokinesis, these things are moving. She's wild looking. Her pupils are dilated the way her eyes are all black, and she's threatening and menacing. And she was a substantial lady. She was a strong girl. I had to come up to her, but no, everybody else was backing up. Only because I had to act. I said, nothing's going to be gained. Nothing good is going to happen if I don't. So I had to try that. The worst that happens is it doesn't work, but it did. And she was much better after that. That's one isolated example. So,
I know I work a lot with what I call attachment removal.
Yes.
And I know you do as well. Can you give any examples of what people might experience to make them think that they may have an attachment, which we know is very rare?
Yeah.
But
the clingers.
Yeah.
I call them clingers too.
Yeah.
Usually it's when somebody's been at a haunted location and they feel they brought something back with them, particularly an asylum, an abandoned mental hospital, or tuberculosis wards. And people bring back all kinds of junk from those, especially if they're sensitive. And it strikes at night or they'll, and almost always in the evening, they've got something. And they can have manifestations like they're driving and they see a face in the rearview mirror. It's got to be disconcerting. And, they'll hear the knocks on their walls that they didn't hear before, like something's trying to get their attention. Usually these things will fade. They don't have the same virulence that they would when the person's there at the site, where they picked up on it. Sometimes you need a specialist to come in, like yourself, and peel away the attachment. If they're convinced it's gone, it's probably going to be gone. It might come back a little bit, but it's not as potent. And I've had to deal with that too. And that's a real thing too. You don't know what they are, but they're like a lower entity, a lesser demon, but they're something and they're annoying the person. So that's what we would call an attachment. And a shaman would specialize in getting rid of that through whatever their discipline is. I wanted to ask you a question though, before we are done here. You talk about spirit rescue.
Yes.
I tried that once. I don't know if it worked. I was much younger. The first EVP, example of electronic voice phenomena, I ever recorded was incidental. I wasn't planning on it. And a friend of mine were recording in my parents' basement. That's where I lived, in the house and my parents. And we had a cassette recorder going. We were playing some music. Now, I was into ritual magic back then. Maybe that had brought something around. But when we played back our recording, towards the end of it, but my friend Mark and I heard what sounded like a voice, but it was in slow motion, very deep. And it says, help me. And I said, play that again. That sounds like it's saying, someone help me. Now, my brother has like a third generation of this recording. It's not very clear, but you can hear it. So my friend, his recorder, you could, turn a dial and speed it up. And when he sped up that recording, you hear us talking real fast. And you hear pump, 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 like a tapping. And then we hear, Carl, help me.
Wow.
Help. I've never known what to make of that. Is that a spirit in distress? Is that me from, well, it did sound like a woman's voice, but is that me from the future saying change things? Was it a spirit that we had brought in through the Ouija board play? Because the house was actually 6 months younger than my brother and I. I was working on the parents' case at the time. Was it something to do with that? I've just got guesses, not even theories, what that could be. But it says, Carl, help me. Maybe because I was into magic and psychic interests and felt I could help it. Maybe time is not the same in that dimensional reality. Maybe you could advise on what to do. If you ever get any feelings about it, sometime I'll play the recording for you, see what you pick up on.
Well,
I would like to
EVPs are
help.
hard. They really are, because they pick up on residual imprints, time imprints,
Yes.
thought projections, spirits, entities. They pick up on anything that our human ear cannot
Right.
interpret. So they're able to pick up on wavelengths of sound frequencies that are projected mentally,
Mhm.
energetically, from spirit or from ourselves. So it's hard to make that interpretation based on an
Right.
EVP. That's why we would have to step into the energy, see where the origin is, be able to formulate an idea of if this is a spirit manifested or intelligent. If it isn't intelligent, meaning it's something outside of a manifested form, it's its own entity source, then we would step into that. There is no timeline in fourth
Right.
dimension. So then we would find out and investigate who they are, how they know us, what do they need from us, connect to their guides, connect to their angels, possibly bring in family and do a rescue. I've had many EVPs where they've said my name, and I just got to tell you, it's so weird to have spirits to say your name on EVP. Like, they know me? How do they know me?
Yeah. I've had that a
It's
few
like,
times. And that was
wow.
good. I didn't even know what an EVP was then. I didn't know people could record spirit voices. It sounds like a personality in distress, and I couldn't just ignore that. Um, Now, my brother's theory would be and is that that was a lower entity, demonic, that was posing as a woman or someone in distress, so that naturally we would be inclined to help this person and get more and more involved in it. But to me, that didn't make any sense, because what could I do? I wasn't surrendering myself to it.
Right.
Some people might say a soul that needs to be crossed over.
Hmm.
Um, I wondered if it was something from my future or something that I doubt it had anything to do with the parents' case because I don't think I ever brought anything back with me
Yeah,
from
I'm
that.
hearing it wasn't.
Ah,
I'm hearing it wasn't. I mean, if you're a medium, if you're around paranormal activity, you're going to attract spirits like a magnet. And
hmm.
then you're bringing in
Oh,
EVP, electronic voice phenomenon of electromagnetic energy, creates a pulse of energy that now
I
brings
like
more
that.
spirits in like a magnet.
Hmm. Well, I can't get back to the house. Other people own it now. Although Elisa suggested, well, interesting might that be if I could go back to that house where I was brought up and all these things were happening. But not too many persons would be amenable to me. Like, hi, you may have seen me on television. Oh, you haven't? Well, uh, this house, you don't have any strange things going on here. Just I'd like to, if I could go down in your basement, which is just a spirit rescue, is what we call it, and go and leave us in peace. Don't come, I don't know. I'd have to know the people, but I would like to find out if they experienced anything there.
Oh, absolutely. I know a lot of people go into haunted locations that
Yes.
really aren't qualified to go. There's a lot of people selling tickets to go to haunted locations for
Yeah, but
events.
people in,
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
well, it's a franchise. It's inevitable. I don't think it does much good. It gives people an entertainment, and that's what a lot of that paranormal, I call it popular paranormal. It's what it's about. People want to experience the supernatural, if you will, and this gives them a ticket to do it, an opportunity
Mm.
where they may not have had that opportunity before, such as, come in and investigate the Conjuring house in Harrisville, and haunted asylums, Allegheny, different places. Uh, it's, I think it's basically harmless. It's like crossing the street. You're probably not going to get hit. Some people do. Some people bring back an attachment. Some people have a negative experience. But then again, they paid to go there. And it's fun to be afraid. It's fun to be scared as long as you're in a safe place when you're scared, and everybody wants to see the ghost. So basically harmless. It's inevitable. It's a business. I don't think it advances paranormal research much.
No, it really doesn't at all
No.
advance anything. And it doesn't do any healing for the spirits that are actually there. If anything, they get put on display and being used as a form of entertainment. So I'm a big advocate for not doing those type of events, mostly for the protection of the people going,
Yes.
even though they don't know any better. But they're going into these places, they're in harm's way. And as professionals, that are doing the work, they have a responsibility to protect everybody else that's coming in. So if everyone's protected, like if they were to come in and have a training session, and
Yes.
this is what you
That could
need
be
to do,
valuable.
that would be great to be able to educate the public on how to do an actual paranormal investigation the correct way so that nobody's in harm's way. and possibly for the actual betterment of the spirit that's actually there. It doesn't mean we have to force the spirit to cross over, because as you know, we
Right.
can't, but to at least give them the option of saying, hey, do you know what's going on? Do you know where you are? Do you know why people are here watching you? Give them a chance to be able to cross over and be able to get that experience of knowing, hey, I have a choice here. I'm just not trapped in a situation where I feel I'm used as a form of entertainment. Everybody has a different view of it. And of course, no matter anything that I say, people are going to go out and do it anyway. But I think it still should be said, buyer beware for anything that you
Yeah.
do in the paranormal
Yeah.
field.
Yeah, well, ghost hunting is here to stay, and it's a business now, and people are going to do it. Um, it's not a terrible thing. I just don't think it's very productive. People want to spend their money and do that, and and some people, benefit from that. Well, that was a really good investigation. Listen to this voice I caught, or look at the picture I got. This is what we experienced. But like you say, there are inherent dangers to some people.
Mm. I actually have Karen Mossy, who works in the New England area, does EVP. She used to come to my centers and actually present EVP presentations. And that would be great, but it would also bring in a lot of the energy of the spirits in the room. So I would have to control the space and protect everyone involved. That way, if anyone were to leave and have a hitchhiker, as I call them, to go home, they would have that sort of protection. But having presentations is a really great way to be able to educate the public as well, with a lesser, I believe, way to harm them or to bring them into a
Right.
location where they could be compromised.
Well, that's what Elise and I would do if we presented a ghost hunt, which I used to do at a historic Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. That's regarded justifiably as the seat of the American Industrial Revolution, the start of the factory system as it became in this country, with knowledge brought over by Samuel Slater from Belper, England. And it was opened as a museum in 1921 and, refined over the years. I was employed there for 14 years, almost to the week. And we used to do ghost hunts at night. I came up with this idea. I contributed a lot of ideas at planning sessions to Slater Mill. New uniform, certain uniform for Slater Mill rather than the costumes, which we didn't always wear. Tours, hikes, a platform boat that could be in the Blackstone River and give tours there. The only thing, but they did have a ferry that would go down the river, but I had like a stationary platform I thought of. The only idea of mine that floated was the ghost hunts. And that was very popular at Slater Mill. I mean, it lent itself to paranormal investigating, like ghost hunts. We had, there were 4 doors on the site, the 3 buildings on the campus. 4 of the doors, if you unlock them, they'd open by themselves. You had, old building creaks and crunches. The floorboards, of course, were uneven, so you get this unsteady feeling.
Right.
Plus, genuine phenomena. It was haunted. Now you'd get the voices. So that was a wonderful era. Started in 2008, we started doing the ghost hunts. And for the last year of that, Elise was assisting me with that. And we would do a lecture, incorporate that into the ghost hunts. And she would do it. Elise would give a presentation on divination, psychometry, things like that, and tools like a pendulum and the spirit board and all that. And that was quite educational. But
It's a lot of fun. It really
oh,
is.
it was wonderful because you had the ambiance of the place. You'd have to be there. It smelled like an old mill and had the archaic machinery, some of which we could turn on. And we had a giant water wheel display, the water wheel that would power the water with the water drawn from the Blackstone River behind the mills and underneath the mills. And we would go into this dungeon, like the Wilkinson Mill is a stone mill, 5 stories tall. On the bottom one is the water wheel pit. And I'll say, you see why we call it the pit? Dank, dark, and I could turn on the lights and then like lower them. And I'd say to the people gathered during the ghost hunts, I said, now in just a minute, I'm going to engage the water wheel. Why? Because I can. But also, the men who worked in this mill would have been accustomed to that droning sound through their long work shifts. Then I go outside and I engage the water wheel, turn that on. That was, you got an 18,000-pound water wheel. That was majestic. You hear the water rushing in and dunk, 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 dunk. I thought that was worth the price of admission in itself. That was just an extra feature. I loved doing that. Elise was in that water wheel pit once. I saw I was setting up. I said, you don't mind waiting here for me? She said, no, I'd like to. So she was alone in the water wheel pit and sitting there. She closed her eyes after a while. The lights were on. When I came back, she told me the lights had turned themselves off. I thought she'd turn them off, but they turned themselves off. Spooky things happened. You'd see shadowy forms there. The ghost would talk to us. Disembodied voices, that was probably most prevalent. That would happen during the daytime. That's how I knew the mill was haunted. I was there in the daytime most, so yeah. Day or night didn't make a difference there. That was a golden era. The park is, the site has since been acquired by the National Park Service. So the tours are given by rangers, and we can't just go in there anytime, but I'm always welcome there. But the nights of the ghost hunts are done there.
Well, I know that you do an awful lot with the demonology work and the paranormal work. If somebody does want to get more involved or learn how to do what you do, what advice would you have for them?
Well, there's this book that's called Shadow Realms Demonology Handbook. Now that's one source. There are many. That's not the definitive word, but yeah, there, just do your research. Look for books on demonology. You will get other people's slants on it. Books by John Zaffis, by my brother Keith E. Johnson. Modern demonology started, I believe the date I want to give is like 1596. And that's when we were starting to get more into the age of enlightenment. And that was also applied to demonology. Treatises on demonology were written. King James wrote a demonology compendium, and read what's out there. Do your research. You'll hear lectures on demonology, but always stay open-minded, because everybody has their own interpretation of what demonology is. Most of what I think the demonology will find is a subjective approach, that these are evil entities, and they are to be warded, and be cautious of them. Yeah, do be cautious, but do your own research. And you should also talk to somebody like myself who's more pragmatic about the subject. There are applied demonologists, and there are secular academic demonology. An academic demonologist is versed on the lore, the traditions of demonology and demons. An applied demonologist will actually counsel people and say, what can we do about your problem? Try to incorporate the best of both worlds, and actually be both of those. But it is a science, it is a study, and it is becoming legitimized, I believe. I'm just a little different in that way. I don't ascribe to demon manifestation as most people will, except I know it's a real and potent force. We can debate origins, and it comes down to we just don't know. But if you embrace the belief that these are fallen angels, that there was a great rebellion in heaven and the celestial realms, and 1/3 of the heavenly hosts were cast down, they followed Lucifer, who became Satan, and those are the demons. Yeah, maybe it's a good modern myth. Now, when I say myth, all myths were originally embraced as fact. That doesn't mean I didn't say made up. Well, it's a myth. It's a story, and it gives us some answers. It gives the demonologist some answers.
Right.
I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know, but I just think it's a human story. It could even tie it into the ancient aliens premise. That makes a little bit of sense. But we just know that there are forces out there that sometimes seem to be able to invade the human mind. And once we dread the demon, there's its force, there's its power. Once we believe in the demon, accept its potency, believe it has a power to overtake people, and we may be vulnerable, then it's a lethal force in that sense. Then it's something to be very guarded against. But always be cautious with whatever endeavor you, especially when it deals with propensities of the human mind. By the way, parapsychology does deal with the human mind more. ESP, telepathy, premise of life after death, continuance, and more like that, more than the ghost and vampires. Parapsychology, of course, does examine ghostly manifestations, because people do see ghosts. You know, to say that there's nothing to it, there's nothing to all these ghosts and demons and all that stuff, that's probably more irrational than saying, oh yes, they're all around us and they watch us all the time. I mean, to just discount everything, that's cocoon thinking. So many people over the whole of human history and before have seen spirits, forms, apparitions of loved ones that have passed,
Mhm.
seeing things that are menacing. You know, obviously there's something to it. I've experienced it. I have seen physical manifest. Well, they appeared physical to me. I have seen a ghost. I lost count. I don't know if it's 8 or 9 times. I have two photographs. I don't have them accessible now, but I have two photographs of what I take to be demon faces, demon visions, and it's out there. As you were saying earlier before we started the broadcast, there are more things in your there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
Mhm.
You did say that, didn't you? I think I
Yeah.
remember.
And, there's a lot of people out there that don't believe in the work that we do. They would have contradicting beliefs. Other mediums, other spiritual
Yeah,
people out in the community don't believe in ghosts, don't believe in demons. What would you say to them?
I'm not trying to convince them. You know, you're on shaky ground. You try to convince somebody of paranormal occurrences. You know, another one is synchronicity, bizarre coincidences. You know, that's real. Synchronicity is a term coined by Carl Gustav Jung, pioneering psychotherapist along contemporary of Sigmund Freud. People will say, "Oh, that's just coincidence." Yeah, well, I'm happy with that. Coincidence, synchronicity, synonymous terms to me, just with
Right.
amazing frequency. Then we call it synchronicity. I'm not trying to convince anybody if someone comes to me open-minded, like, what can you tell me? Why do you believe this? As you are, but you also know these forces are true. Then of course I'll talk with them, but I wouldn't try to convince somebody. I worked with a person. I've known many people like that. I worked with a person that when my 14-year tenure at Slater Mill in Pawtucket, old Slater Mill Association, she just did not believe in ghosts, and you could not convince her because she hadn't seen anything like that. If she doesn't see it, I can only say, no, I've seen these things. That's why I believe I have. I'm not delusional. I have
Right.
experienced it. No, it's all imagination. No, it can all be explained. There's nothing real to it. I've never seen anything. That it's imagination. There are no ghosts.
Right.
But I wonder if she was, I don't remember if we ever talked about it. I wonder if she was religious, you know?
Mm.
I wonder if she had a faith. Because I have known skeptical people, they will call themselves, yes, oh, I'm a skeptic, I'm a skeptic. Well, do you have a religious affiliation? You go to, oh yeah, well, of course. I mean, I know, God made this world, but I am skeptical, no ghost or anything. Well, think of this universe. I mean, we are a speck of dust in this galaxy. You know, it's wonderful if there are other intelligent life forms out there. It's amazing if there aren't. Possible. But you think we are one of our star soul is one of, what is it? They got it about 200 billion stars in our galaxy, in the Milky Way. Then we've got Andromeda, our neighbor galaxy, which is going to collide with us in some million years. And that'll be spectacular. You got Andromeda, that's an even bigger galaxy. And there are uncounted billions of galaxies. I'm sorry to sound like Carl Sagan. Billions of galaxies in the known universe. And they're out there. And we can see 13 billion years, very approximately, into our remote past, which we think are the origins of the galaxy. But that's as far as our lenses can take us. 13 billion years. A billion? Well, take 1,000. Takes a while to count to 1,000. Count to that 1,000 times. 1,000, then count 1,000 times. That's 1 million. A billion is 1,000 million. Now you got 13 billion years out there of light. And what's beyond that, we don't know. And all through this are strewn galaxies. That seems to be replicated. These spiral things, there's a uniform to it. And we, as human beings, we don't really understand our origins because we're impossible because something can't come out of nothing, however you pragmatize it. And we don't know where it's going. And what's supposed to happen is we're all going to, eventually, trillions of years in the future, matter will lose its cohesive factors. You know, even the particles and atoms will separate, and we'll have cold, lifeless dust will be the only thing. And once there's no matter in the universe, time is irrelevant. So there's no time, there's no past, present, or future if there's nothing in the universe. That's where practical science says we're headed, you know. But there may be, and probably are, other universes, other dimensions out there. And there's a lot we don't know, but we don't even know what dark matter, which takes up most of the universe that we know. We don't even know what that is. It's inferred, it's not seen, but it has a force to it that is pushing the physical objects, the planets, the stars, the galaxies away at an increasing rate, which defies physics, but it's increasingly things are moving apart. Now, when you consider all that, I don't think it's too difficult to believe or suppose that the human consciousness continues. And there are ghosts, and there are strange things out there. There are minds that exist without bodies. In the words of H.P. Lovecraft, the mind that is held by no head. You know, I just think it's not too hard to believe that there are strange things going on, like cryptids, unexplained animals and creatures and, you know, spirit forms around us that talk to us. We record them and we can play it back. There's something out there. There are things out there. I'm more amazed by, you know, how do we get here? What is this place we call the universe? You know, it's remarkable. And is there something else watching us?
Well, I think it's
another planetary system. I'd like to think so. I even think it's pretty darn mind-blowing that there was probably running water on the planet Mars. You know, vast rivers, oceans. There's a lot of evidence for that. Right. So you've got, in our solar system, our little tiny thing, we've got the planet Venus, enshrouded by clouds, you know, sulfuric atmosphere. That's lifeless. That's, to me, that's Earth's remote past. I don't think it's going to turn into an Earth-like planet, but that's what the Earth was like. Get for a little further away to the sun, our Goldilocks, you know, orbit, revolution. Then we've got the planet Earth, and we have life forms here. Then you've got Mars, fairly close neighbor, cosmology, you would say it's fairly close. You've got Mars, which is a frozen desert, but it has weather. It had water. It has crevices. It's got seasons. It's got snow. It's got lightning. Not just like ours, but I mean, they're the same thing. It's dust devils. The little tornadoes are filmed on Mars. So that's Earth. That's what Earth, the planet Earth, is going to become. It's going to be Mars-like. Won't be that far out, but it's going to become, as solar radiation overtakes the Earth and dissipates our atmosphere, we're going to have Mars. So you got Venus in the past, Earth now, then we're going to turn into Mars. I mean, these things are mind-blowing. And that's just in our little speck here, our sector, you know. So that's why I don't think I'm too out there when I talk about demons and spirits and why they're worth investigating. Because a lot we don't know. I think it's a viable pursuit to investigate paranormal phenomena. Twice in investigations, I have sat in a chair, and the chair, in 2 different investigations, has moved back across the room with me. And one was a full-blown demonic case. The other was a poltergeist situation. And I've had that happen. That's wonderful when it happens, but it's small potatoes compared to contemplating these cosmic mysteries, which we'll never totally decipher. We know a lot more than we did a century ago, you know, and spirit research, you know, age of spiritualism was around then. And then it became more cognitive in the 1920s.
Well, I think it's safe to say we know more. We don't know more than we do know.
Yeah. So now we know we don't know.
We know
a lot.
We don't know.
We know a lot more than we did, and we suppose a lot more than we did.
Right.
If you'll have my partner Elise on as your guest sometime, she can elucidate about what parapsychology really entails and how it is. It's at best a soft science, but it explores this phenomenon, which I know is real. There is a particle, it's not the Higgs boson particle, it's something like a citron, but there is a particle that, and I was working on this theory and then somebody beat me to it, a particle that goes in and out of reality. And it has been proven in laboratory conditions that some particles can transcend time, they're time traveling. It's of no practical use to us, but that does happen. Some particles defy what we know about physics. It gets into quantum speculation.
Mm.
Some particles time travel, and
Yeah.
of course, quantum science is the science and the speculation about particles.
Well, I think it's best to keep an open mind no matter what you talk about or what you do.
Yes. Have we solved anything? Have we answered any questions in the show? We've raised more.
I think we've talked about a lot of things that people are going to find so useful and so beneficial. And of course, how can people reach out and connect to you if they want to be able to talk to you about any of the work that they're doing or learning from you, other than your books? Do you have a website they can connect to?
Yes, the name of my organization, if you will, is Panorama Paranormal. We do have a website. You can find it at Panorama Paranormal. We also have a Facebook page under the same name, and that is operated by Elise Giammarco Carlson and myself, and she's our director. I have to work with somebody smarter than me, just keep organized. But it does take, I want to stop short of saying a scientific approach, but a practical approach to paranormal research and speculation. So Panorama Paranormal. I'm not hard to find. I've been on a number of television shows. In fact, a recent one that was premiered this year, two in fact. One was the CW network. It's called Mysteries Decoded, and the other one is a haunting series. And the title of the episode to which I'm referring is Inner Demons, and those chronicle investigations that Elise and I were engaged in. And there was an investigation. Inner Demons is about an investigation we actually conducted from 2019 through 2020. And they have actors portraying Elise and myself, And they actually selected the actor who portrays me, John Castle, based on his resemblance. He had to audition, but he looks like me, so that's why they hired him. I thanked him for adding 4 inches to my height and taking 30 pounds off my frame.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But there is that, and he actually researched me so he could talk. He's talking a lot like me. Oh, that's why. Yeah. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful to have you here on the show.
It's been fun. Like you said, conversational. It certainly has been that.
Yeah. Just having a good time talking about the things, crazy things we do.
You're an excellent hostess, host. I like speaking with you.
I had a great time, and I want to thank the audience too.
Yeah, thank you, our audience.
Without them, we wouldn't be here doing what we do, and them questioning things, asking all the questions that we may or may not have the answers to, but we try our best as well.
I mean, are there experts in paranormal research and investigation? I guess we're the experts. Right. I'm an expert when it works, when I find answers and seeing things.
I always find spirit puts us exactly where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
At the time we're supposed to be there. That's where trust comes in. And knowing we're the person that needs to be called in. So again, Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who watched the episode today. It will be posted all over the place. Please feel free to put comments and questions down for Carl or myself, and we'd be happy to answer them. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.